Thank you everyone for joining today. We are going to wait just a few more minutes to allow others to join the webinar. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunities Rebuild Florida General Infrastructure Repair Program Overview webinar. My name is Kate Doyle, and I'm with the infrastructure team here at DEO. Today's presentation will provide you with an overview of the Rebuild Florida General Infrastructure Repair Program, application requirements, scoring criteria, and next steps. This webinar will be recorded and you'll be able to access the recording, slides, and transcript of the program on the program website after completion of this webinar. We will begin today by providing a brief overview of the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery, or CDBG-DR grant. We will be discussing which communities are eligible for this funding, eligible activities, program requirements, and the scoring criteria that will be utilized to evaluate submitted applications. We will go over the application submission process and discuss opportunities available for you to receive technical assistance. We will leave some time for questions and answers. As your questions arise, please type them in the questions box. We will have time at the end to address questions that have been submitted, but please feel free to enter them into the questions box at any time during the webinar. With that, let's get started. The Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, or DEO, is the primary state partner of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. DEO administers multiple HUD grant programs, which include the Community Development Block Grants, or CDBG. The Office of Long-Term Resiliency is a branch within DEO that oversees CDBG disaster recovery, or CDBG funding, for hurricanes Hermine, Matthew, Irma, and Michael, as well as CDBG mitigation funding. Launched in 2018, Rebuild Florida is a program of DEO created with federal funding to help Florida's long-term recovery efforts from the devastating impacts of recent storms. When the President declares a major disaster, Congress may appropriate funds to the Department of Housing and Urban Development when there are significant unmet needs for long-term recovery. The purpose of CDBG-DR funds is to focus on long-term recovery efforts. They are a last defense funding to address unmet need other federal programs have not yet addressed. CDBG-DR funds supplement and fill remaining gaps, but cannot supplant other federal funds. CDBG-DR funds must be used for necessary expenses related to disaster relief, long-term recovery, and restoration of infrastructure, housing, and economic revitalization. Today, we are discussing the CDBG-DR funded Rebuild Florida General Infrastructure Repair Program for Hurricane Michael recovery. As you know, Hurricane Michael made landfall in the Florida Panhandle in October 2018. $448 million in CDBG-DR funding was announced by HUD in May of 2019, with an additional $287 million announced in December 2019. On January 27, 2020, HUD published the Federal Register necessary for the state of Florida to develop its federally required action plan to access the funding. A total of over $735 million was allocated to Florida for multiple programs in January 2020. Following the $735 million allocation in February 2020, DEO hosted several public outreach meetings throughout the Florida Panhandle and hosted a webinar to seek feedback on the development of the State Action Plan. The initial draft of the State Action Plan was submitted to HUD in May of 2020 and subsequently approved in June of 2020. CDBG-DR funding for Hurricane Michael only became available to the state on June 26, 2020, once HUD approved the State Action Plan. Round 1 for the General Infrastructure Repair Program opened in September 2020, and we're now in the second round of infrastructure funding. According to the guidelines set by the Federal Register, at least 80% of the allocated funds must be spent in HUD-designated most impacted and distressed or MID areas. MID areas are determined by HUD based on the damage sustained. Bay, Calhoun, Franklin, Gadsden, Gulf, Jackson, Liberty, Wakulla, and Washington counties are all HUD-designated MID areas. These areas are highlighted in green on the map. The remaining funds can be spent in the state-designated MID areas. Holmes, Leon, and Taylor counties are state-designated MID areas, shown in blue on the map. DEO has used the allocated CDBG DR funds to launch the disaster recovery programs you see here in the HUD and state designated mid areas. Today, we are discussing the Rebuild Florida General Infrastructure Repair Program, which is designed to fund infrastructure restoration and improvement projects in communities impacted by Hurricane Michael. I'd like to highlight the Rebuild Florida Technical Assistance Grant Program, which we'll be talking about later in the presentation. It is designed to help eligible entities within fiscally constrained counties impacted by Hurricane Michael access Rebuild Florida's long-term disaster recovery programs by providing assistance with application development. We'll now provide an overview of the General Infrastructure Repair Program and discuss eligible and ineligible activities, the minimum threshold criteria, and national objectives. The total allocation for round 2 of the General Infrastructure Repair Program is $111,516,000. State agencies, counties, and municipalities are eligible to apply within the HUD and state designated mid areas. Additionally, school districts, nonprofit, and nonprofit organization or non-governmental organizations may partner with a state agency, county, or municipality as co-applicants. However, there will only be one subrecipient agreement with the eligible applicant. The minimum award is $250,000 and must meet a national objective. Projects must benefit HUD and state designated mid areas, and HUD's national objectives of benefiting low and moderate income persons and/or unmet needs must be accounted for in all project proposals. There is no local match requirement. Subrecipients of CDBG DR funding have more autonomy to make decisions but carry more responsibility to fulfill the requirements of the CDBG DR grant. Subrecipients are carrying out program activities on behalf of the state. They are required to adequately manage the program in compliance with all CDBG DR regulations, including program monitoring, labor compliance, and the environmental review process. Applicants must also provide a detailed description of damage caused by Hurricane Michael. Some examples of eligible activities under the Rebuild Florida General Infrastructure Repair Program include restoration of infrastructure damaged by Hurricane Michael. This includes water and sewer facilities, streets, removal of debris, drainage, bridges, etc. Repair to public facilities such as emergency community shelters, demolition, rehabilitation of publicly or privately owned commercial or industrial, renourishment of dunes and/or dune restoration. To be eligible for consideration of funding, projects must also align with CDBG DR requirements and priorities as outlined in the Action Plan and the Federal Register. This includes, but is not limited to, that projects must demonstrate tieback to Hurricane Michael. Projects must primarily serve low and moderate income, or often called LMI, populations, and projects for infrastructure must support LMI housing or urgent need. Projects must not contain a duplication of benefits. Now we will go over the ineligible activities under this program. Equipment purchases are generally ineligible activities. Any activities that do not meet a national objective are also ineligible. General government expenses, political activities, and any operating and maintenance expenses are ineligible, as well as any expenses incurred prior to the execution of a subrecipient agreement with DEO. All submitted projects must meet all the threshold criteria to be determined eligible. Applications that don't meet this baseline criteria will not proceed to the full evaluation stage. Projects must be located within an eligible HUD or state designated MID area. Projects must benefit an LMI area or address an urgent need. The project must be an eligible activity under HUD guidelines and under the State of Florida Hurricane Michael Action Plan. Lastly, projects must address an unmet need tied to damage caused by Hurricane Michael. Let's discuss national objectives. All CDBG DR funded activities are required to meet a HUD national objective. Projects can only meet one national objective, with LMI being the priority. If LMI cannot be met, an applicant will have to demonstrate that the project meets an urgent need. Projects must benefit a service area that is predominantly over 51% LMI. You can use survey data or census data to determine the LMI percentage. For use to low to moderate area benefit, or LMA, the service must be available to all residents of the service area. So, for example, a wastewater treatment plant cannot qualify under a citywide census unless it serves all of the city's residents. Likewise, assisting a marina that restricts membership could not be funded under the LMA national objective. Urgent need must be justified and documented through narrative or a memo. Determining the service area is an essential first step to identifying the beneficiaries of a program, and therefore the national objective. In order to calculate the LMI percentage or to justify use of urgent need, an applicant must first identify the service area for the activity. Documentation of the service area is required for use of the low to moderate area national objective. Applicants are responsible for determining the service area of a project based on project scope, customers or users, and other available services. Many municipal infrastructure projects will serve all citizens of that municipality, and therefore the boundaries of that municipality will constitute the service area. However, this is not always the case. For example, water or sewer projects with identified end users. An example of this would be if a water or sewer project will only benefit a particular residential area with a set number of households, income documentation must be collected from those households. In addition, if an infrastructure project will benefit residents and businesses beyond the municipal boundaries, those areas must be included in the service area documentation. There are two ways to calculate the LMI. One is by using the 2010 census block data, and the second is service distribution. Survey distribution. Projects must have a tieback to impacts from Hurricane Michael. Applicants must document how the activity is addressing a specific disaster-related impact. A duplication of benefits occurs if CDBG-DR funding is provided to a participant for the same purpose as any previous financial or in-kind assistance provided to that participant for the same purpose. The CDBG-DR program is prohibited from creating a duplication of benefits. This prohibition comes from the Robert T. Stafford Disaster Assistance and Emergency Relief Act, or the Stafford Act, and therefore other sources of funding, like those from private insurance or FEMA, must be deducted from any potential award or expenditures for individual participants. DEO will be monitoring if cases of duplication of benefits arise. For example, you may have a county wastewater treatment plant that was damaged by a hurricane or Hurricane Michael. The estimated cost to repair is $1 million, and the facility received an insurance settlement for $600,000, a FEMA public assistance grant of $300,000 and has applied for $250,000 in general infrastructure repair program funding. The likely duplication of benefit here is $150,000. The county, a beneficiary, received assistance, and the assistance is from multiple sources: insurance, FEMA, and HUD. And the assistance amount would total $1,150,000, which exceeds the need for repair of $1 million. As a federal subrecipient, the applicant accepts responsibility for conducting the project activities in compliance with all federal rules and regulations. Additional information about all requirements can be found in the program guidelines and will be detailed in the subrecipient agreements. When it comes to the operation and maintenance of the infrastructure projects, you must have a plan that details the responsible parties and how the operations and maintenance will be funded after the CDBG-DR project funding. CDBG-DR funds may not be used for operations and maintenance expenses. Now we will cover citizen participation. All applicants must submit evidence of a publicly noticed meeting or public comment period to discuss the proposed project and application. Evidence of the public notice must meet the following requirements: documentation of the newspaper advertisement, a printout of the county webpage showing the public notice, documentation that the needs of non-English speaking citizens have been met where a significant number of non-English speaking citizens can be reasonably expected to participate. In this case, documentation will need to be translated. Prior to applying for CDBG-DR funding, applicants are required to post a public notice in a newspaper of general circulation and to their website that states that the types of projects to be undertaken, the source and amount of funding available for the activities, the date by which the comments must be made, and a contact person for a copy of the proposed application. Applicants must provide for a 10-day comment period, which must be published prior to the submission of the application. Now we will go over the application scoring criteria. DEO will apply a two-phase process to review applications. First, applications must meet the HUD CDBG-DR threshold compliance criteria. Second, DEO will review and score each application based on the scoring criteria on the screen. It is very important to note that if an application does not meet any of the threshold criteria, DEO cannot proceed with full evaluation of the project. As a reminder, those criteria include benefit to LMI individuals and benefit to LMI areas. Projects must also address a clear unmet need, be tied to Hurricane Michael, and primarily serve housing activities. Once the application is determined to satisfy the threshold compliance criteria, then DEO can begin scoring based on the following scoring criteria for a maximum of 125 points. We will now take a look at each of the scoring criteria individually. First, priority for LMI projects. The LMI score will be determined based on the service area the project serves. The applicant should provide their LMI data for the project service area in a percentage form, which will be used to calculate the final LMI score. Projects meeting the urgent need criteria may still receive points, even if the percentage is under 51%. So LMI data must be submitted for all applications. Stormwater infrastructure. All stormwater, potable water, drainage, and wastewater project will receive a full 20 points. Projects on evacuation routes will receive 5 points. Project impact. The impact of the project on the community should be significant, with an emphasis on health and safety, including but not limited to economic impact. This could be businesses involved in design, engineering, and construction. It could be creation of jobs, savings of economic losses attributable to service interruptions, for example, industries dependent on clean water and waterways, community resiliency, etc. More points will be awarded to projects with a significant economic or health safety impact, while less points will be awarded to projects with little to no impact. This will be demonstrated through the narrative of each application. Applicants should make an effort to explicitly describe the project impact, both qualitatively and quantitatively. An applicant can score a maximum of 15 points if the project either improves or repairs an existing homeless shelter or facility that also functions as a disaster shelter for the community. Management capacity. The local entity has the capacity to complete the project and the ability to perform required maintenance. This is demonstrated by experience with similar projects, experience of current staff, staffing, and the contracting plan. The special designation criteria. An applicant can receive a score of a maximum of 10 points if the project is located in a Rural Economic Development Initiative or READY eligible county or community, or is located in an area of state critical concern. Leverage. Up to 10 points can be awarded for projects in which CDBG DR funds are used as federal program local match on another federally funded project, likely FEMA or U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, or projects in which CDBG DR funds used along with leverage funds from the applicant. Project readiness. Projects can earn up to 10 points for project readiness. More points will be awarded if planning is complete and the project is ready to break ground after the completion of a required HUD-compliant environmental review or assessment and funds are available. Less points will be awarded if initial planning has been completed and the procurement process is ready to begin. Now we will give an overview of the application process and discuss how to submit an application and the required information and documentation. Submitting an application is a two-step process. First, you must go online and fill out an application request form to initiate the process. The link to this application request form can be found on the screen, as well as on the program website at rebuildflorida.gov. Next, DEO will provide you a link to the online application portal for the full application submission. Applications must be submitted through the online application portal. However, DEO recommends that applicants draft a Word or PDF version, both for ease of editing during application preparation, as well as to have a backup version of the application for your files. The next two slides are not an exhaustive list of application requirements, but highlight some of the required information all applicants should be prepared to submit. Some of those items include basic application information such as FEIN and DUNS numbers, the completed templates. The templates that you should be prepared to fill out are the work plan, org chart, and budget. Citizen participation documents include things like the public notice, public hearing minutes, and public comments. You should also be prepared to include maps, such as service area maps, floodplain maps, and those that show LMI. And lastly, on this slide is national objective LMI census data or survey data. Additional required information and documentation includes a narrative. In that would include a project description, a damage summary, and a tie back to Hurricane Michael. the project impact, and information on the prevention of duplication of benefits. Procurement. Those would include things such as the policy that's in compliance with 2 CFR 200, current and planned procurements to be funded with CDBG-DR, site control documentation, if applicable, preliminary engineering or cost estimates, if available, photos of the project site and/or service area. Please take note that an applicant's procurement policy must be in compliance with 2 CFR 200. Ensure you are following procurement policies and procedures, as well as ensuring you are monitoring contractor performance. All programs requirements must be met at the contractor and subcontractor level. That includes things such as Davis-Bacon and inspections. Next, we will discuss technical assistance. For entities in fiscally constrained counties eligible for Hurricane Michael funding, DEO has contracted with a technical assistance vendor and is available through a technical assistance grant. DEO's technical assistance vendor will help assist applicants with identifying, determining costs, and writing the scope for the project. For more information and the application for the Technical Assistance Grant Program, please visit the Rebuild Florida website at rebuildflorida.gov or use the link on the screen. We will now open up the presentation to questions. To ask a question, please type it in the questions box and we will answer them as they come in. And now we're going to take just a minute or two to accept applications, and once we start receiving those, we'll begin answering the questions. Okay, we've started receiving a few questions. One, is there a limit on the number of projects that can be submitted? Yes, each entity may submit up to 5 separate projects to be considered for CDBG-DR funding. Another question we received is, I think that the state has a limited amount of money available for use on projects activities that are not LMI benefit. How realistic is it for an application to be funded when it isn't LMI qualified? You're correct. LMI projects and activities must be prioritized, and we're required to spend at least 70% of CDBG-DR Hurricane Michael Fund on LMI activities. DEO will continue to prioritize LMI activities in round 2 of the General Infrastructure Repair Program, as you saw earlier in the scoring criteria. So it's a little bit difficult to tell what might be funded through this round until we see the applications come in. Some applicants could end up making up your points through other areas such as project readiness. Okay, so I see another question that came in asking about if we submitted applications in round 1, do we need to resubmit those in round 2 if they were not awarded? Unfortunately, yes. If you would like a project to be considered in the second round, you must submit another application. Okay, so I'm going to go down to the next question. With the restoration, can that include retrofitting and adding onto a building? So HUD CDBG DR funds do give applicants the flexibility to build back better, including activities added for resiliency. A few things to note. An activity cannot solely be for mitigation. They must primarily address impacts damage from Hurricane Michael. Tie back to Hurricane Michael is always required. And additionally, if the new footprint of a facility will be larger than the current, the environmental review requirements may be more comprehensive, and the additional footprint must be justified as necessary and reasonable activity and cost, as with other CDBG DR activities. Okay, so are applicants still required to show proof of a public comment period due to COVID-19? Yes, the applicants must still submit their proposals to their communities to satisfy HUD's public comment requirement, but due to COVID-19, some public requirements have been adjusted. Okay, we're going to hold for just a moment to look to see if there's additional questions that have come in. Okay, we have a couple more questions. One, are the technical assistance contractors the same as those that were used during the first round? Yes, that's the same technical assistance program that we had initially. And so you can reestablish that contact through the program. Another question we had is, do you have to hold on-site public meetings, or can they be on the website and newspaper? So you still need to have the requirement of having a live public hearing. That could be through a opportunity to have it over the phone, or you could have a webinar requirement. It doesn't necessarily have to be on site if due to COVID you're not able to open up the public hearings, but it wouldn't be able to just be on a website or a newspaper. You would still have the requirement of having some type of live version. I do think that we have some more information on that on our website. Okay, another question came in about is whether or not there's a maximum grant amount that can be requested. There is a minimum of $250,000, but there's no maximum requirement. One thing to keep in mind, though, is the total amount of the amount. But yes, you could have. There's no maximum. Okay. We haven't sent out, there's a question about requesting application but still haven't gotten access. We were actually waiting until after the application webinar to start sending out the links to the applications, and so give us another day or so and then check back with us if you haven't heard. Every applicant needs to submit a work plan, even if the project is already underway. So yes, every applicant must submit a work plan of the project that shows both the time frame and entities involved throughout the project's duration. And DEO has provided a work plan template for each applicant to submit with the respective project. All right, and if you guys could continue to ask your questions, put those into the question box and we'll continue answering those. Right now, we're going to hold for just a moment to see if we have some additional questions. Okay, we got a question about, it says to earn points for a project involving a facility serving as a homeless shelter, can the facility be converted for use as a homeless shelter to earn points, or did it need to serve as a homeless shelter prior to the project? And yes, the answer is yes to that. You can convert it to a homeless shelter in order to receive points. So we had another question that's asking about the tieback to Hurricane Michael. And I think that there may also be some additional information about this in our program guidelines about the tieback to it. But a project must be either directly or indirectly related to the impacts of Hurricane Michael. Generally, for the General Infrastructure Repair Program, this would be something such as the damage to a facility or infrastructure caused by the storm. It wouldn't be a general maintenance type activity. Okay, another question came in, can this grant fund be used to fund the local match requirement for the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, or HMGP? And we'll say no to that, but wanted to also encourage you to look on our website because the application cycle is now open for DEO's Hazard Mitigation Grant Match Program for Hurricane Michael, and that's going to be open until September 30th, 2021. So please look online for that to get the information about HMGP. And please hold for just a moment. Continue to ask your questions. We still have time, and we'll be happy to start answering those questions. So please continue to answer the questions. Now, do want to note that there will be some questions that we won't necessarily be able to answer here today. So sometimes if you have really specific project questions, we might not have enough information to be able to answer it on this particular forum, but we'll be happy to answer those questions. So there's two opportunities for you. One is if you go to our technical assistance, and we really encourage the fiscally constrained counties to please enter a application in. It's very easy to do for that technical assistance program. please go ahead and apply for that. That will be extremely helpful to you to be able to get your program, your application technical assistance. And the other thing is, if you look up on the screen right here, CDBG-DR infrastructure app at deomyflorida.com. You can also send us an email if you have any questions, and we'll be happy to follow up with you on those and potentially schedule a call to have further discussion if we need a little bit more context. So hold for just a moment and we will see what other questions that we have here, and we'll be back on to answer those. Okay, so it says, of the 5 submitted applications, how many will realistically be awarded to each subrecipient? I don't really have good answer for you on that. We really would have to have the opportunity to just score the applications and see what fits best. But we do encourage communities, obviously, if you have a priority project that you're most concerned about or that you think would score the best. So it's really up to the community to make that determination of how many applications you'd like to submit. Okay, so there's a question related to a jail and whether it's considered a government business. Please reach out to us on that and we'll follow up with you on this particular project. And then that one would be a good one to maybe reach out to our technical assistance program to help you with that. Okay, so there's a question about debris removal. So it says, can you please describe what debris removal activities are eligible, and can this be in stream and creeks? So while debris removal is an eligible activity, in a disaster recovery circumstances, the cost for debris removal is typically covered by FEMA. And so if a grantee or a sub-grantee did not file for FEMA assistance, the applicant is required by the CDBG-DR statute to apply for FEMA assistance because they can't be used for activities that are reimbursable by or for funds which are made available by FEMA. So this is where you're kind of going to run into a potential duplication of benefits issue, since those are typically funds that are made available by FEMA. So if a FEMA or another source has provided debris removal assistance, CDBG-DR funds may be able to recover the remaining unmet need. This is sometimes would be required, for example, for a FEMA match. The amount of remaining unmet needs should be determined through a duplication of benefit analysis. And for example, let's say that FEMA will provide assistance, but it's not yet available, then the CDBG-DR grantee may provide temporary assistance and recapture the CDBG-DR assistance once the FEMA funds are available. Okay, debris, and also just following up, it was kind of talking about streams and creeks, and debris removal from streams and creeks is generally eligible. Okay, so there's a question about whether or not we can get a copy of the presentation. We are going to be posting that on our website, so just look out in the next couple of days for that. We're also going to send a follow-up email to all the attendees with the information on how to access the the recording as well as a copy of the presentation. Oh, it looks like maybe someone can't hear. And then what about? All right, we've got a couple more questions in. So how do you determine if a project's service area is LMI? So first we need to determine the service area, and then there's two methods for determining LMI. The first is to use census data, and if you go onto HUD's website, they have a really useful mapping application to help assist you with this. It pulls from the census data. Another method, if you prefer, is to use a survey. And so the income survey must meet HUD requirements to be statistically sound. And we have additional resources and technical assistance that can be provided about how to conduct an income survey. Also, some information on that for those of you who may be familiar with the Small Cities CDBG program, there's a lot of information on how to conduct surveys with that. And some localities may have already done this, for example, with the Small Cities CDBG program. So there's a question about dredging and whether that's an eligible activity. We'd probably need some additional information about this project. So generally speaking, dredging does not fall under any of the eligible activities listed in the program guidelines, but we would have to be able to see, we need a little bit more detail on that to determine whether there could be eligibility. So we'd need a little bit more information. Okay, we have a couple of additional questions. So there's a question about the application and whether that was different from round one. If you go online, it's really going to be the same application. There weren't any differences to that. So if you have the previous information, that would be the same. One question is about, say you are in round one and you submitted an application and now you're in round two. Do you have to conduct an additional public hearing? Please reach out to us related to this and we will give you some feedback on that. Okay, so there was a question about the application deadline. It says something about on the Rebuild Florida page that there's a June 30th deadline. So there may be a little bit of confusion related to that. That's the housing repair program that's going to be closing on June 30th. This general infrastructure repair program is open until September 17th. Okay, so we still have a couple of more minutes if anyone has any additional questions, and we're going to kind of just look through and see if there's any additional questions that we haven't answered. Okay, and it looks like I see just one more question that we're probably going to answer. Will round 2 use the same ACS census data as round 1? And so this is asking for LMI calculations purposes. So if you look online, the most current HUD income limits for FY fiscal year 2021 are based on the ACS 5-year, which is for 2011 to 2015. So it sounds like there's maybe a little bit confusion about this. It was talking about, can investors use to repair rental properties? Not sure if this is related to housing or not, this question, but want to make sure that everybody's aware that the General Infrastructure Repair Program is only for eligible infrastructure projects and for eligible local governments or nonprofits. It cannot be used for housing. Okay, so thank you so much for your time and participation today. After this presentation, you can learn more about DEO's Office of Long-Term Resiliency and the programs available to those disaster impacted communities. Please visit www.rebuildflorida.gov or reach out to us via email at cdbg-dr infrastructure app@deomyflorida.com.